I'll start with starting seminary. So I had to go to seminary. People jokingly go, cemetery, you were in cemetery. So I was in seminary. And years ago, and I was asked to speak at a high school disciple now weekend intensive. So I had to speak like 6 times, 6 hours in like 2 days, and then we culminated it with a worship service like this one. So I said, yeah, I'll do it. And so I was getting ready for these 6 talks, and all of a sudden, just these thoughts and these questions and these wave of doubt started to hit me. So I'd been asked to come speak, to teach these young guys, high school guys, about how to take their faith to the next level, and yet I was having these crazy doubts about, the Bible. Is it really real? Does prayer really work? Does God really exist? Is Christianity too exclusive? Is the only way? And all these questions and doubts were just flooding my mind, and I was just filled with anxiety and dread, and I had to somehow just, pray my way through it and get out and teach for that hour. And then come back, and those same doubts and thoughts were swirling through my head. And somehow I made it through that weekend. And it was brutal because I felt like a hypocrite. I felt anxious and guilty and shameful. And how can I teach people about faith if I have so much doubt? And it was like I had this kind of internal civil war. A part of me that wanted to believe and a part of me that wanted to disbelieve. And as I look back on that experience, and I look back on that season in my life, a season of doubt that I talked about last week, I realized that part of it was driven by a misunderstanding of 2 concepts, 2 words. And I believe these 2 words are 2 of the most misunderstood words in the church, but also in our culture today. And if we can gain some clarity on these words, what they really mean, some understanding, and see how they relate to one another, it can help you if you're navigating a season of doubt. Even if you're not in a season of doubt and you're just, running down the road of life, trying to grow and go with God, it will also be helpful. So let's look at those 2 most misunderstood words, that's hard to say, and look at Hebrews chapter 11, verse 6. Hebrews 11, verse 6. The writer of Hebrews says that without faith, it's impossible to please God. Because anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists, and he rewards those who earnestly seek him. It's a great verse. It's a powerful verse. It's a wonderful promise to those who are skeptics and those who are believers. God rewards people who seek him. But, as the song said back in the 80s, you gotta have faith, 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 right? So, everywhere I looked back then when I was going through doubt, I was like, they would say, hey, if you want peace in your life, you can have peace. You just gotta have faith. You want God to answer your prayer, you just gotta have faith. You want to see God work a miracle, you gotta have faith. And I was thinking, I want all these things, I just don't have faith. I want it, I used to have it, feel like I've lost it. How do I get it? Faith is so misunderstood. First of all, people believe this about faith. You say what faith is not. Faith is not parking your brain, okay? Parking your brain. Come to church, better park my brain out in the parking lot, right? Because I can't use my brain. So faith many times gets a bad rap. It needs someone to be its PR agent. Faith, if it doesn't need a facelift, it at least needs Botox, okay? I know what you're thinking, Ben, you need some of that right now. I know that, I know. It's okay. It's not parking your brain. What do I mean by that? Well, Mark Twain, the great writer, said this about faith. He said that faith is believing what you know ain't so. Friedrich Nietzsche, great German philosopher, said that faith is not wanting to know truth. That's insane. But that's a very modern or postmodern way, the way some people view faith. It's the way I was viewing faith back in the day. It's kind of parking your brain. It's irrationalism. It's silly, you know? You believe in fairy tales and, you know, Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny and God. They're all the same thing. No, they're not. So faith is not parking your brain. Faith is also not positive thinking. It's one of my favorite. By the way, it's good to be positive. It's good to be optimistic, but that's not going to change your reality. There was a book out years ago called The Law of Attraction, which said you think certain things and you will attract those things into your life. If you want to be wealthy, think wealthy. You'll be wealthy. If you want to be successful, you know, think about success. You'll draw those things into your life, the law of attraction. Listen, I played basketball my whole life. I practiced hours and hours and years and had great coaches and tried to surround myself with the very best people I know of. But you know what? I was never going to be a lotto pick in the NBA. Heck, I wasn't going to play college. No matter how many select teams I was a part of and how many trainers told me, your boy's going to be D1. No, he's not. No, he's not. Positive thinking will not get you there. It's good to be positive, but you can't put in what God left out. Can't do it. Hey, word of faith theology. You got to have faith. If you have faith, you're going to get healed. If you're going to have faith, you're going to get the promotion. If you're going to have faith, you're going to get a new car. You just have to have faith and don't doubt, and all these goodies are going to come into your life. That is not true. By the way, you may get a new car, new job, new house, get healed. That's great. I'm for you. But it's not because of your faith. Faith is not magic. It's not you having these emotional, psychological feelings that manipulates God to do what you're doing. You say, Ben, how do you know? It's very simple. You can take the Haiti-Houston challenge, okay? If what you believe about God and life is not true in Haiti, then it's not true in Houston. Well, I've never been to Haiti. You can do that. If you have a passport, today or tomorrow, get on a plane, go to Haiti, be positive about wealth, be positive about health, be positive, or have faith, and stay there for a year, 2 years, and let me know if it works. If it works, write me, write the book, I'll write the foreword. It's kind of silent here. It doesn't work. That's not faith. There are many people, most people, who had great, amazing, mountain-moving faith, and they suffered greatly, greatly. They were burned at the stake. They were starved. They went around in caves, not receiving what they were promised. So faith is not positive thinking. You can't manipulate God to do what you want to do by your faith. Faith is also not professing propositions. I believe there's a God. I believe Jesus. He died, he rose again. I believe, check, 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 check. That's faith. That's not faith. The devil believes that. That's what James says. He believes that. I don't think the devil has faith. So it's not just believing propositions. What is faith? Let's go back to Jude. Why not? Jude 1:3 gives us one definition of faith. And the reason that we don't understand faith, the reason it's misunderstood, is the word faith in the Bible and also in our culture is nuanced. It's nuanced. And we don't do good with nuance right now. We live in a time and a space where nuance doesn't sell. You're either on the right or you're on the left. You're either a Republican or a Democrat. You're either for me or against me. There's no in between. There are no sides. There's no nuance. Look what Jude says about this nuanced word called faith. He says, dear friends, although I was eager to write to you about the salvation we share, I felt compelled to write and urge you to contend for the faith that was once for all entrusted to God's holy people. So faith can mean, as Jude was referring to, a body of beliefs that have been passed down to us. Jude was a recipient of the gospel, the good news about what God had done in Christ Jesus. Christ came, he lived, he died, he was buried, he rose again, he sent his spirit, and he gave us the church and his word to live by. This is our faith. We're fighting, contending for the faith, the reality of God in Christ that he's revealed to us. So faith can mean a body of beliefs. Faith also can mean acceptance for no reason. Like, some people just kind of have faith. They don't need reason. They don't really need evidence. They just say, yeah. Yeah, they're trusting. I have faith. So that's a definition of faith. Faith also can mean, and I like this one the best, I'm biased, trusting in something or someone without all the evidence. Trusting in someone or something, usually you cannot see without all the evidence. That is, I think, it's a pretty good generic definition of faith. So everybody has faith. That's what I didn't understand years ago when I was in seminary struggling with doubt. Everybody has faith. The big giants of our faith, Augustine, Anselm, Aquinas, they have faith. The skeptics that you see on YouTube and podcasts, the atheists, the agnostics, the astrophysicists, they have faith as well. Everybody has faith. You have to have faith, believing in something you cannot see, cannot prove without all the evidence, to be a human. Which leads us to the second most misunderstood word. That is the word reason. Reason. Reason, like its cousin faith, is multi-nuanced. What is reason? What does it mean? Reason can mean using logic and your mind to just navigate everyday life. Like, you use reason to get here today. I used reason. What do you mean by that? Well, we got up and we thought to ourselves, man, it's Sunday. I've got to go to church. You're thinking about that. You know, you're using biology when you drink some water or some coffee for a purpose. You're believing and trusting, using your reason and the law of gravity as you walk. You believe in space-time categories, memory, all these things. You're reasoning. If I do this, then I'll get here at this time. I'll plan here. So that's reason. We all use reason. Also, reason can mean, when people use the word, using your mind to achieve certain knowledge. Okay, that's how we got a little bit in this whole mess in some ways, was through the 17th century René Descartes. Descartes wanted to find certainty. He wanted to find clarity. So Descartes locked himself up in a room with a stove and said, I'm going to find certainty by doubting. Not by believing, have the commitments, but by doubting. So he doubted everything he could. He doubted whether he existed. He doubted whether the stove was real. He doubted his country. He doubted this. He doubted the Bible. He doubted, until he doubted so much, he came to the conclusion of one thing he couldn't doubt. He could not doubt that he was doubting. So he said this famous line that we use, I think, therefore I am. And upon that foundation of reasoning and doubting, he was going to build his infrastructure of finding certain knowledge. That we, or he, as an individual thinking brain, mind, could come to certainty about all things in this realm and the next realm by reason and by eventually through the scientific method. Okay? Pretty big project. So when people say, I'm a person, I'm a man or a woman of reason and rationality, they can be referring either directly or indirectly to Descartes and his project. Also, reason can mean using your mind to understand God and this world. God tells us in his word over and over again to use our minds, to reason. Isaiah says, come, let us reason, says the Lord. 1 Peter 3:15 says you need to be able to give a reason to why you believe what you believe. Acts chapter 18 says that Paul was in these synagogues and he was reasoning with them daily. Acts 17, he's talking to the Epicureans, he's talking to the Stoics, and he is reasoning with them. Reason is a wonderful gift God has given to us, but reason is a gift from God. It is not God. Reason is one of the tools that we have that God has given us to be able to navigate this world, to understand a lot of things about his world, and to invent a lot of cool things through science that we all use and can benefit from. Reason is great. Reason is wonderful. Reason cannot carry the full weight of the human experience. Reason, therefore, is limited. It's limited. And reason is also tainted. Because of our fallen nature, we reason through a lens of fallenness. So people are not just looking at the facts objectively. Many times they're reasoning through their own moral or immoral proclivities. I wrote a book years ago called Why Mike's Not a Christian. I can save you the trouble of getting the book. Why is Mike not a Christian? Because he doesn't want to be. End of book. Shortest book in the world. Okay? By the way, I said more than that, but that's basically it. He doesn't want to be. He doesn't want there to be a God. He wants to live his life. He wants to do his thing. So Mike is not looking at life and reality through an objective reasoning lens. He's looking at through his own selfishness and his own self-interest, and his own morality or that lack thereof. So one of the greatest scientists in the history of mankind has to be Blaise Pascal. There's a new biography out on Pascal. It's called The Man Who Made the Modern World. Here's what Graham Tomlin says, the biographer, about Pascal. By the way, how many of you have ever heard of Blaise Pascal? You've heard of Pascal? Yeah, what? Of course we have. Okay, check this out. Pascal was a groundbreaking scientist, mathematician, geometer, physicist, philosopher, polemicist, and theologian, as well as a man of deep spiritual consciousness. He virtually invented probability theory, proved the existence of the vacuum, laid the foundations for integral calculus, performed what has been called the first modern proper scientific experiment, established the principle that made the creation of the hydraulic press, developed the first public transportation system, demonstrated that air has weight, designed and built the first functioning calculating machine that became the precursor to the modern computer. He died at the age of 39. What are you going to do with your life? Huh? And on top of that, what a coinky-dink, they found out when he had died, he had written all these philosophical and theological papers that are just as good as his science. This guy was a true prodigy, genius, polymath. He was amazing. And he wrote a lot about, in his writings, someone help me, he speaks French here, called Pensée, about this relationship between faith and reason. Faith and reason. And he said that one of the tasks of reason is to communicate to reason that it has its limits. So here's the guy who's one of the inventors, if you would, of the world that you and I inhabit today. So many things we use and do in our life, we can thank Pascal for, okay? But he said, listen, there are limits to reason. We're not just reasoning creatures. We're creatures and human beings with emotions and desires and passions. So he came up with this iconic quote that the heart has its reasons, which reason does not know. And that many times, people either believe in God or choose to disbelieve in God, not because of reason and evidence, but because of their own passions and their own sinful proclivities and desires to do their own thing. So I would say that, or he would say that reason is what teaches us that there are things beyond reason. Right? There are things beyond reason, things that transcend our ability to reason and understand and analyze and figure out. That's true in any endeavor. If you push biology far enough, if you push mathematics far enough, if you push physics far enough, if you push chemistry far enough, you're going to bump up into the limits of your ability or our instrument's ability to understand reality or that field of knowledge. So faith, remember this, if you had to put this message in a soundbite or a text message, faith has its reasons and reason has its faith. Okay? To use reason, you have to have faith that your mind can comprehend reality. To use reason and to do science, you have to believe the world is made in some type of law-like fashion. To use reason, you have to have faith that my mind can communicate to other minds that the formulas that I come up with, the experiment, actually comport with what is really real. So the idea that there are some people who have faith, oh, they're just irrational idiots making their way through life, and there are these cold, rational people who are purely reasonable. That's not true. We all have reasons. We all have faith. They work together. So, back to the Bible. How do we grow our faith? Let's look back at Hebrews 11:6 again. I'm going to read it again. Without faith, it's impossible to please God, because anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who earnestly seek him. Say, well, I'm a skeptic. I don't believe, and you can't just make me a believer. I know I can't. Here's what Pascal said. Pascal had a lot of friends who were skeptics, who were partiers, drinkers, and gamblers. We'll talk about Pascal's wager another time. So he would say to his skeptical friends, okay, I understand that. Why don't you do this? Let me give you an experiment. Why don't you start reading the Bible as if it's God speaking to you? Try that tomorrow. Why don't you start praying as if God is there and he really hears you? Why don't you start going to church on Sundays instead of sleeping off your hangover? Just come to church and sleep there. And get around people who believe in God or seeking to live that out. Why not, when you're going to work and school, why don't you look at the people not as just accidents and chemicals, but look at them as someone made in the image of God, and maybe seek to love them or serve them. Pascal would say, try that experiment. I like what Henry Nouwen said. He said, you don't think your way into a new kind of living, you live your way into a new kind of thinking. Back when I was going through doubt, I thought, I've got to have it all figured out. I've got to be able to figure out everything and analyze it and explain it. No. You live your way into a new kind of thinking, not the other way around. I think a better word, at least a better word for me, would be trust. You know, faith to me needs at least another 28 days in rehab. I like trust. Faith and trust, it's really the same thing. Faith is really about trusting. Who do I trust? How do I trust God? How do I grow in my trust with God? It's about trust. We're justified by trust. Trusting in this gospel, this grace of Christ that's outside of us. We grow in trust, but we're going to talk about next week, praying. This mysterious yet really practical exercise that God has given us to be able to access life and his presence in our life. And we trust. We don't have all the answers. We don't have to have all the answers. No one has all the answers, even Pascal. But we can trust. We can take the next step that God has for us right now in our journey with him. Years ago, there was a guy, a philosopher and a writer by the name of John Kavanaugh, and he was kind of going through kind of a midlife crisis thing. And so he didn't know what to do, so he'd read and really admired Mother Teresa, so he got on a plane, flew thousands of miles to Calcutta, and he went to visit Mother Teresa, who was working with the sick and dying in the streets of Calcutta. And he was there a couple of days helping her, moving things, watching her take care of these people who were dying of these just horrible diseases. And after a while, Mother Teresa came to John and said, may I help you? Why did you come here? And he said, Mother, I came here because I want you to pray for me. And she said, well, what do you want me to pray for you about? And he said, I want you to pray that God would give me clarity, that I would have clarity And Mother Teresa looked at him and said, "That I will not do." He was like, "What?" "Yeah, I will not pray that you have clarity." And John goes, "Why? Why will you not pray that I have clarity?" And Mother Teresa said, "Because clarity is the last thing you're holding on to and need to let go of." And he said, "Well, you always seem to have clarity. I followed your life, your mission, your sacrifice. You always seem to have clarity." And Mother Teresa looked at him and kind of smiled and said, "John, I've never had clarity. Never." She says, "But the one thing I've had is trust." Trust. And I will pray that you will trust God more deeply.